This episode of Behind the Regs is sponsored by Plan Checker. Plan Checker is a UK-based digital platform designed to connect clients with verified building control and construction professionals, making it easier to find the right expertise at the right time for the right job. It doesn't replace building control bodies, and it doesn't carry out restricted activities or functions. It simply creates clearer, more transparent access to the professionals working across the industry. If you're a professional, a client, or part of the wider built environment sector, you can learn more or sign up at planchecker.co.uk.
Welcome to Behind the Regs. I am Jack, joined by my co-host Nader, and today we have Stuart Hammond joining us. Stuart is going to be discussing the role of the RBI. We've had previous guests discuss what their opinions are, but we're very interested to hear a different perspective on what the role of the RBI can be viewed as, because like building control is, there's many different interpretations, and getting the perspective of other people is equally as important than just one or two others. So, Stuart, if you would be kind enough to give us a brief background on yourself and tell us how you got into the industry, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, no, thanks, guys. Really appreciate your invite to come on to the podcast. It's a pleasure to be here. You guys do a fantastic job. So I'm Stuart Hammond. I work for Act RBCA. I got into building control pretty much how most people get into building control. My father was the head of a local authority building control. So I've been around construction since I was basically on bottle. So, kind of through osmosis and summers out doing contracting work or, labouring, and then coming back and seeing people come to the house and dad kind of talking about things over dinners and so on and so forth. It just kind of piqued my interest. I kind of did it ad hoc. And then what basically happened was I was going to go to university, be a lecturer. So I've got a master's degree in history, but a master's degree in building surveying as well. And I just fell into my father's approved inspector. So back in 2000, he started Prime Construction Consultants, which was one of the first 5 AIs on the original register. And that was where my professional career started. So that's a little bit about me, but I'm not interested. Let's be honest. You want my thought pieces. You don't want to talk about me. So.
No, it's definitely good to hear where you came from, because no one really ever sets out to just go, I want to be a building control surveyor. There is always a story of how something's happened and you've ended up in the industry. You've worked in the private sector throughout your career and moved through the ranks to director level. How have you found getting into director level? What sort of work did you have to put in to get there? I believe you're class 3 as well.
Yeah, class 3, and then moved up to director. So it's a natural progression, Jack. I think that the thing is, there are those in the building control industry that like to do the day-to-day work, right, and like to ensure that regulatory compliance is achieved. And then there are those that think, do you know what, I want to bring the next generation through. And that was probably the key factor for me moving up through management to director position, that I wanted to be part of creating another generation of building inspectors or registered building inspectors. Because, we're an under-resourced part of the construction industry. We play a vital role. And if you look back at what's happened over the last 18, 24 months, we've been the yardstick by which everything has been measured in terms of the changes to the construction industry. So a regulatory point of view has been what's been, I don't want to say picked on, but perhaps to a certain extent picked on. And that was the reason. That was why I decided to go into management. And then, it either sits well with you or it doesn't. And I've actually found it quite, invigorating. I get to do my day-to-day. I get to do my, inspections, my plan checking, my other bits and pieces. But like I say, I also get to support my team in achieving what they want to achieve. And that's really important. I think if you want to turn into director or manager or look after an RBCA, you've got to have the people that do your job in mind. So
I can attest to that, Stuart, because obviously we've worked together on previous employment, and you've always provided your time, even when you're busy, to get on a call and share your knowledge, and it was a very good time when I was working alongside you, and obviously get the chance to pick your brains most of the time, to be fair. So I can attest to the fact that you really had that passion to help other people progress through building control in the past and now, I'm sure.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, my friend. It's always nice to know that what you actually do is appreciated by the people that you do it with. You don't get that. You don't hear that day to day, right? You don't hear it from a lot of people that you've worked with that go, oh, really appreciate your time and everything that you do. It just comes automatically. But yeah, to hear that's really nice, and I appreciate that a lot, mate. Thanks very much. So
Yeah, I think that is a very important thing for RBIs coming through, to have a manager still got boots on the ground, still doing the plan checks, available to talk you through technical issues, or has a real keen interest to see you progress. No, I've had trainees that I've worked with before, and there's nothing more I enjoyed than seeing people get better and better at what they do. I know I'm not an expert as such. I am still very new, which is why management support is massive to me. But I think having the right people in management that really do have a keen interest on seeing people grow and wanting to support that is definitely what the industry needs with how things have gone so far. Um, I do have a question for you in respect of the profession. There's been a transitional phase, which I think we've all been a part of. Do you think it's stabilizing, or is it still more of a transitional period for it?
I think there's a level of stabilization. Now, that's a loaded word because stable in what we do is a difficult thing to quantify. I think if you imagine we're now 2 years into competency, and that additional recompetency is coming very quickly. I mean, 2 years is gonna fly, right? It's 24 months, but we're all gonna have to start thinking, how are we gearing up as RBIs? How are we ensuring that our teams of RBIs are getting the jobs that they need and exposure to jobs that they need to ensure that they can retain their competency? So I think, yeah, there's a level of stabilization, right? I think we're all comfortable knowing that we're RBIs now. We're all comfortable being on a register, right? Understanding that we are a protected class. But there's that other side of, with recompetency is coming, right? We've got to be prepared for that, and we can't just sit on our laurels and sit there and go, do you know what? We're fine. No, we'll come to it when we come to it. I mean, I do professional development for my team as part of my kind of yearly as an RBCA, and I find that very important because it gives me the opportunity to have the discussion with them about what it is that they want. Do they want to progress? Do they want to stay where they are? If they're staying where they are they getting enough of that work? If they want to progress, how can we get them more work to their class level, right? And then that becomes a business decision and not so much an RBI decision, which then kind of crosses across both sides as an RBCA lead and also as an RBI. I know what I need to achieve my competency, but I know that as a business leader, I need to ensure that they're getting that. And that sometimes can be very hard because, at least for my class threes, that's a much more difficult option at this point in time. And I think we should probably have a discussion about that at some point in this podcast, and I'm sure we will, in terms of whether there's the opportunity available to RBIs to do that.
100%, Steve. Stuart, sorry, I completely agree with you on that one, because I think all of us has sat in a few meetings last year, and there's no clear information inside that class 3s are going to be able to retain their class 3 if they're not carrying restricted activities within that class. And the only restricted activity they can carry within that class, we all know it's within the BSR itself. And if they're not doing that, are they going to be able to retain their class 3?
Absolutely. Yeah,
There's no answer.
Yeah, no, that you've hit the nail on the head. That is the key thing, right? And I think the problem is the frameworks that currently exist for RBCAs with the BSR are limited to a number of specific large-scale RBCAs, right? It's not been opened up fully enough to the industry. Local authorities still have the options to do it, but obviously, not naming names within this podcast because I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but there are ones gone by the wayside, which we're fully aware of. So Ascent no longer exist and we're on the framework. There are still currently 3 on the framework, but why is it not open to the rest of us? That's my question, I think, and it's a question I've asked BSR on numerous occasions. I think you need to not have the door shut and open the door to everybody, because you are limiting your access to class 3 surveyors who, unless their jobs are in transition, because we were lucky enough to retain work as an RBCA in transition, they're not going to have the option to do it. And, I can only, and this is probably the wrong terminology, but I'll use it, I can only feed my RBIs of a class 3H nature with what I've got in transition, right? And if I've only got 2 or 3 jobs in transition, it's very difficult to share that across a team to ensure that everybody can get their progression, especially when I have a group of 2 Fs who are ready to take that step. And I think that's a real shame.
There is going to have to be a transitional period if you consider it that some of these class 3s that are involved with certain types of projects who are on this list may be retiring or moving on at some point without giving some opportunities to different people to be involved. It's going to go back to the start where they're going to want a competency for show you can work on a class 3, but then no opportunities to have ever done that because you've got to have a golden ticket to be there. Like you say, there needs to be some change where more people can be involved. If they've proven their competency, why should they not be given access to those types of works? For proven competency was the key to do the role. Yeah, I can understand frustrations and concerns across the board for that.
And I think you're exactly right, Jack. I think there's also an option there to open up a conversation between registered building control approvers and the RBIs that work for them and the local authority, and to, in all intents and purposes, kind of put to bed this sense of combativeness between the two, because ultimately the RBIs are the key to that. We all must undertake the restricted activity. The functions are done by the LA, by the RBCA. The RBIs do the job. But ultimately, they need, as you've just said, to have access to those jobs to be able to show their competency in doing them. So if you can't get RBCAs under the framework with the BSR, can you have a conversation between RBCAs and LA in terms of how can we support you as local authorities to basically do what it is that you need to do, which is achieve the regulatory compliance?
Yeah,
A lot of
collaboration
people talk about
is.
it. Yeah, I was just at the tip of my tongue. Collaboration. I'll let you finish, Jack. No. You finish down. But
No,
it's just
you take this one because collaboration is your thing, and you'll say better
it's
than
not
I
my
will.
thing. It's not my thing. It's just it frustrates me that a lot of people out there, a lot of big names, big voices speak about collaboration, but nobody's doing anything about it. They may be doing something about it in the background, but we're not aware of it. And there may be things out there that assist collaboration, but nobody wants to look at these things. And that's what really frustrates me, because collaboration, but where is it? We're still today talking about how an RBCA can collaborate with an LA, how the BSR can collaborate with an RBCA, rather than the 3 that are only allowed to be part of that. And that frustrates you as well, Stuart. Not as a business, is for yourself as a class 3, for your colleagues as class 3.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is exactly it. Yeah, I mean, we live in a world now where we don't have, as Jack and you have said, the opportunity to do our job and to do our job on buildings that we should be able to work on, right? In all intents and purposes, or should have access to be able to work on. I understand the competencies and I understand the situation in terms of how the new framework has come about, and it makes sense. But ultimately, if you don't provide opportunity, you are limiting the pool of resource that you have, and such a small pool we have of resource available to us. Jack brought it up a little bit earlier. We're going to have a situation where we've got another level of heavy retirement in RBI because of the fact that people are heading towards retirement age, and there's no push, right? I mean, the local authority put their money where their mouth is from government, and they put a training program in place, right? You know, they put money into it to ensure that there are people coming into the local authority to learn the job. I bang this drum pretty darn hard where I currently work in terms of, can we get trainees in the door? I got trainees in the door straight away. Kind of, I've got 2 at this point in time, and the intention is that you're building them up so the next generation above them can move forward and they can move into their place. That is what we need to have in place. And if that requires collaboration, which it absolutely does, then someone's got to be having that conversation. And I think, you know, things like this podcast and conversations we have outside of private meeting rooms are where we can start to push that forward. And I think, you know, it's people like us who want to see this happen, which will hopefully see change. So
We're all RBIs. We all work in the same industry. We all do it because we want to do the right thing. So why not make it all happen together? Let's have the open conversation with everyone so they know that this is what needs to be done. But
You
we'll
can't have the
move
open
on
conversation
to
with
the big
everyone.
question. The big question, what does an RBI do? And if we look at responsibility, pressures, expectations, what, in your view, is an RBI and what do we do? Obviously, we've got restricted functions activities, but overall, tell me. Open up.
So I mean, yeah, let's get into it then. So ultimately, right, let's treat this industry like a car, right? The car is the RBCA or the local authority, right? It is the vehicle with which we undertake the regulatory functions. The driver of that car is the registered building inspector. It is that person's responsibility to ensure that regulatory compliance is achieved on the project through plan check, through site inspection, and through ensuring that all of the information shared by principal designer, principal contractor, so on and so forth, is checked, assessed, and meets what it does, or is intended to do, which is to create a safe building for occupation. So,
For clarity, Stuart,
yeah,
that's law. That's embedded in law. That's legislation. That an RBCA, the car, cannot function without the driver. That's law.
absolutely. That is the key thing, right? And, you know, to embellish on what an RBI does, they are pivotal to what we do. You know, as a registered building inspector, as Nader's just said, it's ingrained in the legislation that they do that function. They do those activities, right? But ensuring that they do that activity well and with a robust nature doesn't just sit with them. It sits with the teams that they're part of. Because ultimately, no man or woman is an island. We constantly have to look to exceed our own potential, be that through CPD, be that through learning. And one of the key things I ever learned when I was a trainee was every day's a school day. because every day is a school day. You can't walk around thinking that you know everything. You know, I'll throw my father under the bus here, but ultimately, the first thing he ever said to me when I started was, don't ever leave site without telling them exactly what they need to do. And that's been ingrained in me to be able to give that information. When we were told, stop giving information to clients and designers and to principal contractors to how to achieve compliance, I mean, you could see RBIs fall apart across the country, because ultimately they were like, but that's what we do. We ensure compliance is met. And sometimes people don't understand the approved documents. They don't understand the guidance within it, and they don't understand how they can deviate from guidance or how they can achieve justification. And that, to a certain extent, is also what we do. So as an RBI now, one of the key things I say to my teams are, you know, yes, you don't give design advice, but you give compliance advice, because compliance is what you are there to do, right? If somebody asks you the question, how can I ensure that this is compliant? You can tell them it's in the approved document. You say,
Look at the guidance.
this
Exactly. Yeah.
this guidance
It's
tells
in
you
the
exactly
guidance.
how
There
to
are
do it.
provisions in there in the guidance to help you to get there.
Yeah.
That's it.
Exactly. And I think that's you know, that's key. Every day's a school day. RBIs are there to drive the car. Without us, the regulatory system doesn't exist. It's been enshrined in legislation that way. We need to be given the level of respect that we deserve. And I think from the industry, not just from a regulatory industry, but from the construction industry at a whole. I mean, I'm going to dig myself a huge hole here, because there's going to be clients and developers who hate what I say here, but they need to listen to us. Like, they need to pay attention to us, and they don't need to just go, oh, great, building controls here, put your IVs on, put your RDAT on. He's just come here to do a health and safety inspection, which is not what we do. Like, they're not thinking ultimately about the occupants of the building after it's been signed off.
They want to get paid. They want to get their money, and they want to go.
Exactly right. And if we boil it down to the simplicity, neither do we. Once we sign that final certificate, we are basically not in control of that building in any manner unless it triggers the regs at a later date. But as an RBI, and something that I tell my RBIs, would you want to live in this building after you've signed it off? And that's the key factor, right? We may annoy people, we may put them on the back foot, we may not do exactly what it is that they want to do. But I'll know when I go to bed that night that building's safe, and that the people and the families and the children and the next people who own that building and so on and so forth will be safe. And that's key, right? I mean, we can get into another discussion there in terms of maintenance of buildings and so on and so forth, but that is a homeowner's responsibility, right? Maintenance of a building is key, and there's too many people out there who don't go and clear their gutters and don't go and wash their windows or do whatever it is they got to do. But if you've got enhanced life safety in a building, sprinkler system, water mist system, whatever it may be, the RBI has agreed that that's acceptable, but it's your responsibility as a homeowner to ensure that that's maintained, not an RBI's.
Stuart, there's a lot of accountability now on us individuals, on RBIs. Do you think the system generally supports us RBIs carrying that level of responsibility, though?
That's a difficult question. I don't think there possibly is, unless it's ingrained within the industry, within the vehicles that are looking after the RBIs, right? So local authority, RBCA, who look after an RBI, right? They're there to ensure that the RBI is supported in a way that they can be supported.
Like a seat belt in a car, then.
But we've never had a trade body, right? Until recently. So now we have a trade body. So the Association of Registered Building Inspectors is there as a support structure for RBIs.
For all RBIs, it provides that support for all RBIs?
I think it does provide the support for us now. I think you supported yourself prior to them being kind of started. That the intention was that, we all got our competencies in a quick ass rush. If 6 months to get your competency in was a pretty quick turnaround for some. But there was never the support, right? And I mean, as you say, I don't think until that trade body, i.e. the Association of Registered Building Inspectors, existed, there wasn't anything for us. We were kind of out in the cold, as if to be like, well, congratulations, you're now a protected class. You've shown your competency. Now get to work. Without anybody sitting there going, well, actually, who's supporting us doing what it is that we do? So yeah, no, I don't think there's been the level of support that there should be. I think it needs addressing, and I think it is being addressed by the Association of Registered Building Inspectors at this time. And I think probably more needs to be done.
This episode is sponsored by Plan Checker. Across building control and the wider construction sector, one issue keeps coming up: capacity. The work is there, the responsibility is huge, and the pressure keeps increasing. Plan Checker was built to help bridge that gap by making it easier to access independent, appropriately qualified professionals when support is genuinely needed. Whether that's for plan reviews, consultancy input, or specialist advice. It doesn't change statutory responsibility, and it doesn't interfere with regulatory routes. It simply helps people find expertise without relying on informal networks or last-minute phone calls. If you want to see how that works in practice, visit planchecker.co.uk. Fair enough. So from your perspective then, what does a good RBI actually look like in today's system, beyond just meeting the minimum competence threshold and all of that?
Good RBI knows that he doesn't know everything or she doesn't know everything. And that is a good RBI. Somebody who is eager to learn and eager to ask questions, eager to ensure that they don't just rock up on a day-to-day basis, hard hat on, high vis on, work boots on, onto site, and just phone it in. Right? That's key. Right? A good RBI is somebody who wants to progress in their career, wants to learn in their career, and is hungry to learn new things. Because the construction industry moves so quickly from prefab to, timber frame was non-existent, right? It existed, but it was never really the kind of primary driver of new domestic build. Masonry was always the key. The approved documents set out for a masonry build, right? If you look at Part A, it's designed specifically, really, for a masonry build, not for a timber build. The STA have come out. We've got other bodies there that are helping us with timber frame. But knowing that you don't know everything and that you need to learn about new structural or construction techniques, I think is what's key to a good RBI. So that's a multifold question, Nader. It's got so many different facets to it. I could sit here for a good couple of hours and just hammer on about.
It's just maybe it's not a question to catch anyone out. It's a question just to I wanted to understand, because obviously at your level as a director, you've seen many RBIs, you've seen how they work. You can gauge what a good RBI looks like, and we can all agree there is always room for improvement. Nobody's perfect. Perfection doesn't exist, in my opinion. That's my opinion. I'm not saying it does, but it doesn't exist. But people strive to perfection, which is a brilliant thing if everyone does. I'll leave that next one to Jack. I think we'll move to the one that we've touched on, local authorities versus RBCAs and the disconnect.
So I hate that word, and I hate you for bringing it up.
It's okay. It's okay.
But ultimately, I'm only joking. But what I'm saying is,
no, but it's an open conversation. It's transparency at the end of the day.
Right. That terminology of RBCA versus LA or LA versus RBCA, I'd like to bin that today. I would literally, rip it up and throw it in the bin, because yes, there are two separate ways to undertake building control in this country, either through the local authority or through a registered building control approver. But everything reaches the same outcome, right? Everything reaches the sign-off of a building meeting building regulations compliance. So ultimately, we're all in the same boat. And I think that's where the difference lies, right? We have to take away this sense of LA versus RBCA and start putting the focus on the RBI, who work for those two. Because ultimately, like we've said at the start of this conversation, they are the ones who will undertake that activity that allows them to do their functions and to sign off buildings. So whether you work for the local authority as an RBI or you work for an RBCA as an RBI, it doesn't matter. We're all the same. And that's what the Association of Registered Building Inspectors is doing. It's basically trying to show us that we're all the same and stop putting an onus on the difference between us and start saying, actually, we're all the same. And I think that's key. And like I said earlier, I think collaboration then becomes another part of that. You know, our RBIs working for local authority, working for RBCAs, and both ways. You know, is there an opportunity to have that conversation across? I'm not saying that I think there should be a national regulator, and I'll quite happily go on record here and say I don't think we need a national regulator. We've got one. It's the building safety regulator. I don't think we all need to become RBIs under a government-based regulator. But I think there needs to be a conversation between LA and RBCA and how we can utilise resource across the two of us and help each other through collaboration and access to larger buildings that are not available to the RBIs who currently don't have access to them.
With that then, where do you think the gap really comes from? Do you think it is just from when it all first began with the private sector and it's just been carried on through generations just because one is a dark side or the other is the better side? Because again, like you say, we all are RBIs. A different function where we work for, you're either local authority or...
Yeah, you're right, Jack. It's an age-old disconnect, right? It's an age-old adage of us versus them. You know, with the local authority having been the first primary regulator and then private practice, you know, coming in and undertaking that function, there was a sense of you're taking our work, but that no longer exists, right? Under the new regime, that absolutely doesn't exist. And anybody that maintains that thought process, that they are a blocker to progression, right? If you are sitting there utilizing that kind of terminology, you are not helping move the regulatory function forward. You're also not helping RBIs who work for the local authority or work for RBCA to achieve what it is that they need to achieve, which is to undertake the restricted activity. And I want it gone. You know, I really just want to lose that sense of kind of pitting each other against one another. There's no need for it. There's absolutely no need for it. And the sooner we can look to do it, the better. But, you know, it's hard, right? It's hard to take away an ingrained thought process from a generational perspective. That's really hard to do. You know, we all know that it's very hard. Leopard doesn't change its spots and so on and so forth using the adages, but, you know, we've really got to stop it. And, you know, as a generation, myself and yourselves, we are the first step in terms of doing that because we've started to take leadership positions in companies that allow us to remove that terminology, right? And I think that's the key thing. If we can remove it from our vocabulary, it gets removed from the next generation's vocabulary, at which point it moves and moves and moves. And before you know it, when we're ready to retire, it won't exist, right? And that's what I hope. I mean, I hope it happens earlier than that. But in all intents and purposes, you know, generational change is hard. But, you know, we could be in a position where when we look to retire, we can happily say that there is no disconnect between the two.
Yeah, I was literally having a conversation with someone yesterday about that there is a new generation of building control. And that's not to say that we should be pushing the old generation out, because it's just changing some bits of thought into, okay, we've worked that way before, but this is the new way of working. And we need to collaborate. We need to shut this dark side down. We're all in the same boat. We all want to achieve the same goal of safe buildings and, keeping people safe in their own buildings, which I think is about the 80th time I've said in maybe 9 podcasts coming up to it, but I don't think we'll ever get old. But in practical terms then, how do you think we can sort of bridge between the two? Is there a system we could look at maybe implementing which can provide collaboration where, say, if there are local authorities that may not have suitable staff competent, I know they have the partnership schemes with LABC where one authority can plan check for another. Is there a way that we could work together?
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head. It already exists. If they can do it between local authorities, why can they not do it between a private practice and a local authority? There's
Sure,
no reason.
absolutely.
There's no reason why they can't. They've already got the structures in place to allow it to happen. What needs to happen, I think, is we need to have those conversations with them. Right? We need to go into council offices. As RBCAs, we need to go into council offices and we need to just sit in front of chief execs and heads of building control and go, look, sorry, we understand that we work within your area and that, we have taken a percentage of your work and you are struggling to find RBIs to undertake your statutory functions. Why don't we help? We're happy to do so, right? We're happy to give you the resource that you need to continue to undertake your function. Ultimately this comes down to choice, right? I don't want to use the word client, but ultimately the developer or the homeowner or whoever makes the decision that an initial notice needs to be served or building control is required, they basically make the decision whether they go to LA or they go to RBCA, right? It shouldn't matter to us who they go to. It should just matter how we can ensure that they get what they need, which is a compliant and safe building. So I think we're in a position where we can do it. We just need to drive it. And then comes that generational issue of, well, the people that are currently in power perhaps are the ones that are still going, well, actually, the RBCA is the dark side and the LA is the light. And, we don't want to work with you. We don't want to do that. So I don't want to move those people out of position, but ultimately I want them to at least think about changing their thought processes and using the resource available to them across both of the regulatory functions to do what it is that they do in terms of restricted activity.
It's very interesting, Stu. Like you said, the systems are there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all about embracing them.
Utilizing them, right?
And utilizing them. Exactly. Adopting them, utilizing them, embracing them. True. Right. Competence and professional memberships. Want to touch on that and get your thoughts on that as well. So there's a noticeable trend of professionals focusing solely now on competence assessments rather than pursuing a chartered or professional membership. What's the driving shift in your view towards that, not being interested to pursue that chartership with a certain association and saying, that's it, fine, I'm going to just focus on my competency assessment, get my class, and that should be good enough, because all employers now are more focused on what class of registration you are. Some of them, I'm not saying all of them, because obviously I don't want to generalize or say that all of them are, but some of them, they only look at the class. And I think, and it's more common with local authorities than maybe private sector, because what they look for now is, what class are you? and sometimes the RBI that was once a manager before that system, now if he doesn't have a class 4, no, you can't get a manager position because you haven't got a class 4. Whilst you and I know and Jack knows, a class 4 is a tick box now. So what's your view on that?
Yeah, no, I get it, and I think, you know, I see it. I see it with everybody who comes through the door. Everyone that comes through the door to work for me, in all intents and purposes, that idea of competency has just become the number one, because
Currency.
ultimately, whatever class level you hold is the level of work that you're allowed to do as an RBI, right? Now, I get it. I get the point they make of, you know, let's look at the competency. Let's see what you can actually do, right? Great. That's what you can do. I know lots of RBIs who are more skilled than the competency level that they belong to, because ultimately they didn't have access to the work within a 3-year period when they undertook their competency assessment, right? So ultimately they don't have an opportunity to do work that they understand and know how to do because of that competency. If I am interviewing somebody for a role, if they hold a professional membership with CIOB, RICS, CABE, whoever it may be, that is important to me, because that shows that they didn't just have to sit in front of a 2-person panel with a third kind of blocker person. They didn't have to go through an exam simply. They took the impetus to achieve a professional membership from a professional body, right? That shows me that you've got hunger and drive and desire to do this job, right? Not just that you went one day, oh, actually, I'm tired of being on the tools, or I'm tired of being an architect, and actually I know a little bit about building control, and I'm going to go and start as a class 1 somewhere, and I'm going to knock out a few plan checks, and I'm going to do a few single-story rear extensions and a loft conversion, and then I'm going to go and sit a BCSF exam and so on and so forth, and then I'm going to go and work for an RBCA, or I'm going to go and work for the LA, and that's going to be me done. I've got my competency assessment, happy days, I can do my job. That's not a good RBI to me. That's somebody who just is looking to do the bare minimum to achieve a job role. And I don't want that. I want somebody who is hungry to learn, hungry to succeed, and knows that to do that, perhaps a membership to a professional body is something that they need. And I think that's definitely a problem across the industry. I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen it, right? I mean, you know, you've spoken to people who've gone, oh yeah, well, I've got my CABE membership coming up and I don't think I'm going to renew, because ultimately, well, I don't want to spend out another £300 of the year because it's not necessary. I don't need it for my competency to ensure that I can do my job. So what's the point? My response to them, as I'm sure your response to them is, don't be silly. What do you think you're doing? You've worked hard to get that professional membership, right? It didn't just get given to you, right? You sat and you did a technical report. You sat in front of a panel like you did for your competency to achieve that, right? I mean, some people are driven by post-nominals, and I'm sure after this podcast there'll be plenty of people that go on my LinkedIn and go, oh, he's got quite a few post-nominals, hasn't he? They're not a driver, right? They're not important to put after your name. But what they are important is to show that you are a professional and you have taken the time to invest in your career and your education to ensure that you can do the best job available to you.
So we've spoken about the scale and the pace of change. Does it feel like the industry has had some time to absorb what's already been introduced, or do you think we're still a bit stuck and still trying to adapt to where we are?
I know from my experience and my team, we've adapted. Right, we understand the new system. We understand what our requirements are in the new system. What if the industry as a whole has done that? That's a much more difficult question to answer. I think it probably needs a bit more time to be absorbed fully across the whole of the industry, because, you know, Change is always difficult. We're kind of 18, 24 months into this substantive change to what it is we do as regulators. But we've had opportunity to settle. And if you haven't settled at this point in time, I would be concerned, because that is part of what we do on a day-to-day basis now. I think we touched on it earlier. We said, look, we don't provide design advice. And if you are still providing design advice, that's a problem, right? If you are providing compliance advice, then fine, because that's exactly what we're intended to do. There was a situation when this first came about. So back when the Building Safety Act hit in 2022, and obviously we saw the changes to be affected to the Building Act and then the replacement of AIs with RBCAs. In my opinion, and I was probably, I wouldn't say I was in a minority, but I didn't hear it from a lot of people, there should have been, in my opinion, a public service announcement provided to the nation about what the changes were going to look like, so they could understand what was underway and how the new regulatory framework would look. That's been embraced fully by the RBCA, LA, and RBI community. And I think, like you said, it's done at pace and change has happened and we're in a good place. But obviously there's going to be outliers that still need to be brought into the fold. But I think we need to move focus, right? We need to move focus now simply from actually restricted activities, restricted functions to, okay, how do we get RBIs to do those, right? When they're out of their class level. And I think that's where pressure and pace needs to be put now, rather than just simply at the foot of, well, do you understand that now you have to have a competency and you have to do this and you have to do that, right? That's second nature now. Me as an RBCA, it's the first thing I say when somebody walks in the door and says, I want to be a building control inspector. I'm like, right, this is what you need to do, right? I'll give you all the tools that you need to achieve what you need to achieve to get your competency, to get you on site. But I can't do anything more than that. You have to do a certain percentage of this yourself. And, my boss's bosses will probably turn around and be like, Stuart, don't say people should have to work weekends. But ultimately, we give them time during the week to undertake training and learning as part of our trainee program. But if you wanted to do a master's course, or you wanted to do something to supplement what it is that you do to show that you're a good professional, perhaps you need to do that. And perhaps that's time out of your day or your time rather than our time. But going back to your original point, Jack, I think we're at a position now where we're good in terms of understanding what it is that we need to do. I think reinforcement will always continue, but we're in a very good position to understand from a regulatory point of view and from a functionality point of view what we need to do. So
you mentioned a public service announcement. I think that is a massive missed opportunity there. There's a lot of things which don't get discussed or could be put in the news. Obviously, they talk about 1.5 million homes need to be built, but then they're not talking about the stresses of a whole regulatory system change, which is not going to be helpful to these 1.5 million homes being built when the whole industry is having a bit of a shake-up.
What was the slogan,
all this
Jack?
change.
What was the slogan? What was the slogan? Was it
What's
Build,
that?
Baby, Build? The slogan from the Ministry of Housing. Was it
Build, Baby, Build?
Ah, okay.
What a great, that's just genius, right? Absolutely top draw from government that, build, baby, build. But while we're building, just so you know, we're going to absolutely destroy the current regulatory system and then we're going to rebuild it in the process, which might prohibit a little bit of what it is that you want to do, which is building. And just on top of that, as a little, sprinkle to the ice cream cone, we're going to create a brand new building safety regulator who will only work on buildings above 18 metres. So any major city in the country that wants to build and can't build has to build up rather than out. And as such, we don't have the capacity to be able to facilitate that they can do their job. because we're going to basically make sure that only a certain class of RBI can do that work. Now, I'm sure we're getting to the end of this podcast, so things are going to start to tail off.
And it's only just over 500 of those class 3 in an 80+ million population.
It's just, yeah, absolutely right. It's just not good enough, right? You've basically got a minutia of available talent to do a wealth of work. So, they really didn't think about it. And, if you look now at what the BSR do, right, there is a focus from the new heads of the BSR to speed up the process, but while speeding up the process, not limiting the level of oversight that's available, right? So new builds are getting probably a bit more of a turn, right? They're being looked at a little bit quicker. But my problem with that is that's not the crux of what the whole regulatory change was about. You want to take this all the way back to 2018 and the Grenfell Tower tragedy. That was due to external cladding on a high-rise building that was not fit for purpose. The external wall remediation work that has to be done to HRBs in this country is languishing. So, we're in a position where that work isn't being looked after because, much like the government has said, build, baby, build is where they want to be. And where they want to be is ensuring that, they can get those HRBs out the door and constructed to create their 1.5 million new homes.
So if we look ahead for, say, the next 5 years or even to 2028 when re-registration's coming about, what in your view would success for the building control profession look like?
Good question. 25 to 40% more staff across the industry in LA and in RBCA. Right, so a huge industry drive in terms of bringing talent from whatever sector it may be into building control and bringing another generation through. I'd like to see HRB work, Class 3G work available to the Class 2 RBI and to ensure that they can make their progression forward for those that want to and have it available to every regulator and LA through, some form of collaboration across BSR, RBCA and local authority. And just a sense of removal of that antiquated local authority versus RBCA mindset, right? Let's have a generational shift away from that thought process. That's what I'd like to see in the next 5 years. And I'm not going to lie, I'm probably going to be trying to be the spearhead, or at least within that tranche who are trying to push that forward in the next 5 years. Because I can talk the talk, but can I walk the walk? And I think that is where I want to be. I want to be walking that walk for everybody, for every RBI in this country. I want to ensure that they can get what they need from the industry, while also ensuring that regulatory compliance is met and the bottom lines aren't hurt and that the government are achieving the targets that they want to achieve and everything, right? In a perfect world, I want it to be perfect. But I've got to pick my battles, and those are my battles at this point in time. So,
Finally, Stuart, before we end this brilliant conversation, I would say, what advice would you give to RBIs trying to navigate competence, career progression, and well-being in this ever-evolving landscape?
what would my advice be? I think my advice would be true to yourself, right? As an RBI, be true to what you want from your career, right? You are the master of your career. Nobody can function without you. And ultimately, you take responsibility for what it is that you do. You find the most collaborative environment that you can find, and you use it, right? If that means moving from LA to RBCA or from RBCA to LA or to the BSR, wherever it may be, where you think you can create the most collaborative environment to progress your career, increase your competence while maintaining a healthy lifestyle, right? No one wants to be working at 8 o'clock at night. No one wants to be working at 10 o'clock at night. No one wants to spend their Saturdays when they should be out with their kids, having fun and doing what they want to do, dealing with work. So think smart, right? As an RBI, think smart. Think how can I be supported in the best way that I can be supported? And I suppose that's my best advice. And then, you know, I'll close it out with just come and see me if you're not happy where you are, because ultimately, you know, I'm quite happy to facilitate whatever it is that you might need. But you know, that's not my point. My point is that, you know, as an RBI, it's your responsibility to ensure that you're doing what it is that's right for you. And I think the Association of Registered Building Inspectors are going to help you do that. I think great team leaders are going to help you do that. I think great directors are going to help you do that. Great RBCAs and LAs are going to help you do that, right? Go where you think you can do the most and don't be afraid to jump if you have to, because business is business, right? It's not personal. It's what you need to achieve, not what the RBCA or the LA need to achieve.
Great advice. Brilliant. Stuart, spot on, honestly. Thank you. And some people may take you up on that offer, though.
As if they make it to this end of the podcast. So
That's the whole aim. We want them to go to the end. But yeah, thank you very much for your time, Stuart. It's
No,
honestly
that's great.
Great having you. Great conversation. Brilliant insights and information shared is second to none, I would say.
no, thanks guys. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It was yeah, it's good to have a good discussion about where we want our industry to be, and I think these are the important forums to allow us to do it. And you know, I'm always open to a good chat. So if you get a good spike out of this and you want me to come back, I'm happy to come back and have a conversation. So
we might
Absolutely,
need you to come back maybe
thanks for taking the
next
time
year.
out to join us. It's greatly appreciated.
no worries.
This episode of Behind the Regs is sponsored by Plan Checker. Plan Checker is a UK-based digital platform designed to connect clients with verified building control and construction professionals, making it easier to find the right expertise at the right time for the right job. It doesn't replace building control bodies, and it doesn't carry out restricted activities or functions. It simply creates clearer, more transparent access to the professionals working across the industry. If you're a professional, a client, or part of the wider built environment sector, you can learn more or sign up at planchecker.co.uk.